Hey, I'm Bill Fowler, one of the teaching pastors here at CBC, and we're thankful that you have chosen to stream or download this sermon from one of our series that we preach through on Sunday morning. Just want to encourage you that this is never meant to be a replacement for you being involved and being a part of a local church where the Word of God is preached, where you can be known and use your gifts to serve others, how God has wired you. And so as this can be a supplemental thing for you to encourage you throughout the week, would really encourage you to find a local group of followers of Jesus and get plugged in with them and see how God will grow you there. So thanks again for watching. If you smell something, hey, where did my Febreze go? So, I have Febreze, that someone stole it. I ain't afraid to use it. We've been using it all morning. So there's worse things that could happen than a bad smell in the sanctuary. So be grateful. And if you're not, you're a sinner. Because it's worse on the stage, I can promise you, than it is down on the floor. There's been many famous battles in history, right? There's been just a few. The Battle of the Alamo, you're familiar with that one? Old Davy Crockett. Battle of Waterloo, where Napoleon ate it. Battle of Yorktown, Gettysburg, Battle of the Bulge, Battle for Endor. Today we're going to look at a one that predates them all, and it's a lesser-known battle, but it's a significant one, called the Battle of Mandrakes and Maids. And if you've read ahead, you know a little bit what's going to happen. If you think, and this is one of those passages, if you're like, you came in here and you think, my family's got drama, we're dysfunctional. This is one of those passages that makes you say, you're not the only one. This family's got drama with a side order of drama. And we're going to unpack it today. But really, there's a bigger point to this passage than just, yep, everyone's messed up. There is a root to what's going on in this family that's causing this battle of maids and mandrakes. And it's a similar root to some of the issues that we struggle with in our life that may be bringing conflict in our life, or just maybe just some of the things we deal with. And so we're going to get to the root of what's going on there and talk about that as we kind of look at this battle that's going to happen in this family this morning. And the kind of the way the flow of the passage is, there's kind of five movements, I call them skirmishes in this battle. And we're going to kind of work through each one. And at the end, we'll just kind of let's look at the problem. Let's look at the problem. Let's deal with it. Let's deal with our own selves, all right? And again, remember, the original audience to this passage would have been the people of Israel walking around the wilderness for 40 years. And it's probably one of those aha moments as they're hearing this. There's a scene in the old movie, not that old, but old for some of you, the Men in Black, where Will Smith finally realizes that there's aliens and he's going to be a policeman for aliens. And Tommy Lee Jones says, crazy, isn't it? And he says, no, not really. It makes sense because I could have sworn my third grade teacher was from Venus. And then he says, Jupiter, actually. No, one of the moons, Mrs. Edelson, right? And it's like, that makes sense. Them hearing this story, where they came from in the wilderness, it's probably one of those, no wonder we are so jacked up. This is where we came from. This is our family, right? And it makes a lot of sense, but yet, I want you to remember, this is not only the people of God who have been chosen by God, this is the very line of Messiah. That God is going to bring the Holy One of God through these people, which it kind of ties into our theme of meant for good. So where we've been, if you're kind of our guest this morning, or this is one of your first time here, we've been unpacking the life of Jacob, and then we're going to look, we looked at Isaac, then Jacob, and then we're going to look at Joseph soon, the second half of Genesis. And Jacob, he stole from his brother. He lied to his brother. He had to run from his brother. As he does, last week, he's deceived into marrying the wrong woman, right? The deceiver got deceived, and so he marries a woman who he wasn't wanting to marry. It was the older sister of the one he wanted, and his uncle had tricked him, and then the uncle said, well, you can have both. You can have both sisters, just work for me for another 7 years. And so he does, and he marries these two sisters. And I told you I'd deal with the polygamy issue briefly in the Bible, because a lot of people say, well, why does the Bible allow for polygamy in the Old Testament, and you know, what's going on there, and has God endorsed this? God does not endorse this. God has made clear from the very beginning that one man, one woman in covenant, right? But you have to remember a couple things. Number one, when this is happening, there is no scripture yet. Okay, the Bible has not yet even begun to be written. Moses comes hundreds of years later, so they don't have any direct revelation except for the promises that God has given to Abraham's family. So there's no law written. Moses is going to later say, do not multiply wives like the pagan nations do. He's going to unpack that. The New Testament's going to make clear, Jesus says, from the beginning it was this way. Paul is going to say things like, an elder has to be a husband of one wife. Right? And by the New Testament times, polygamy was not an issue for the Hebrew people. But at this point, they're just taking their cues from the culture. And God, in his graciousness, he doesn't endorse this, but he allows it because of the hardness of men's heart. And he's not saying this is a good thing. I like this. I want this. But he is going to use it for good. But just understand that in the Old Testament, Revelation was progressive. Right? They didn't have everything that we have. We have the entire 66 books of the Bible. They didn't have anything. Right? And so I think it's really easy for us to look back 4,000 years and just judge these people and be like, oh, these morons, what are they thinking? They're just a bunch of clueless. Just remember this. If Jesus tarries in 1,000 years, people are going to be looking back at our culture. And you don't know what they're going to say about us. And you don't know what they could be like, you believe these people used to take pictures of their food? And they spent $1.4 billion on Valentine's Day for their pets, which is true. I read an article last week. You believe that? Do they realize that people are starving all over the world and they spend $1.4 billion on their labs? So just understand, be a little gracious because you don't know where we're going to be, okay? So understand, but that's kind of the picture. But that's not really the biggest issue in this passage. It is an issue. It's not wise, but it's not the issue. The issue we're going to see. So let's pick up in chapter 29, verse 31, where we left off last week. When the Lord... Oh, there's the battle. Here's skirmish number 1, too, by the way. This is where we start. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah's in a tough spot. She's married to a man that doesn't want to be married to her. Not her fault, not his fault. But it is very clear who his favorite is. His favorite is his choice, is Rachel. Right? And God meets her in her pain, and he allows her to have children, and she's going to have many, and these names are going to be significant. We're going to see as they unpack them, they're going to name them certain things. It's going to be very revealing of where their heart is at the time. But what you have right here already is one of these sisters, Rachel, has the love and affection of her husband, but she's barren. That's her pain. And Leah is going to not be barren, but she longs for the love and affection of her husband, right? And that's her pain. Right? And we're going to see that build. That's going to be significant. So verse 32, Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction. And the name Reuben just means, look, a son. Right? So that's what his name means. He is the firstborn. So she says, the Lord has seen, he looked, and now I have a son. But here's the sad part of this. Look at the last part of this verse. For now my husband will love me. Right? That's what she wants. But the question is this, will he? Will he really love you? And we kind of start to see behind the scenes, what is she craving? What does she want? She wants love and affection. And the question is this, will having children give you the affirmation from this man that will fill your soul, or at least you think will fill your soul? Will that actually happen, and will it satisfy you? That's where we're going. Verse 33, apparently not, because she conceives again and bore a son and says, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me the son also. And the idea of hated is not that he hates her. It's a rhetorical device that the Hebrew writers use. But it's you could say she's unloved. She's unloved by comparison. He loves Rachel. He doesn't really love Leah. But now you see a little bit of faith in this woman. She says, the Lord has seen me. The Lord has heard me. And so she names him Simeon, which is related to the Hebrew word Shema, hear. He heard me, right? He has given me another son. He's hearing me. He is seeing me. But yet she's still not getting what she wants. She's not getting her husband's affirmation. So again, she conceives and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached or connected to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. And so she names him Levi, which means connected, right? Or attached. But again, now, look at what I'm doing. I am killing it here. 3 boys. Surely now he will be connected. Look how I am outperforming my sister. Right? And how many of us in our lives have tried to perform to get the approval of someone else, whether it's a spouse or a parent or a friend group or a company, only to be stunned that all our hard work and effort didn't get us anywhere, didn't make a difference. That's where she's at, and she's going to keep at it, and she's going to keep at it, trying to perform, trying to earn his favor, and it's not working. In verse 35, and she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise Yahweh. Therefore she called his name Judah, which basically means praise the Lord. And then she ceased bearing. And what you see here is a little bit of a change of her heart, I think. What we would call growth. She's like, I'm done trying. I'm just going to praise. Right? I've tried to earn his favor. I mean, think about this. This is 4 kids. That's 4 years of trying to earn and earn. That's a long time. And so finally she says, I'm done. I'm just going to rest. Which I think is significant because who is the most famous descendant of Judah? It's the Lion of Judah. It's the King of Kings. It's the Messiah, the one in whom Hebrews 4 says we have rest. And she rests. Now she's going to slip back into her old patterns for a minute, but at this point she's content and she's like, I'm done. I'm just going to trust God. I'm just going to worship God. Right? So that's skirmish number 1. All right, here's skirmish number 2. Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, and she envied her sister. Right? She is driven by envy. See, both have something the other one wants, right? Leah has kids, but she doesn't have love. Rachel has love, but she has no kids. And the grass is greener, right? And they both want what the other one has. They're both striving, thinking this will, if I can have just this, then my life will be complete. I'll be satisfied. I will be happy. And her envy drives her to put demands on her husband that he can't carry the weight. What does she say? Give me children or I shall die. That's not in his department. He's not the sovereign of the universe. He's not the one who opens the womb. But it's an interesting idea, and I think it's significant to mention that we, because of the emptiness of something in our soul, something that we are desiring, would actually put pressure on other people to perform for us to make us happy. Ever done that? And that they would carry the weight of your soul, which no person can, by the way, carry. Which is why when we do like a premarital counseling, we talk about expectations. Because I know you think that this guy or this gal is the best thing in the history of the world, but there is no way they can meet your expectations of you watching Disney princess movies your entire childhood. Because they cannot fulfill every desire, right? And so she's putting desire on him that he cannot carry. And what happens when she doesn't get it? She says, I'm going to die if I cannot have this. And this is what happens when the object of our affection and a desire is an idol and it can't carry the weight. When it doesn't come through or we don't get it, it feels like death, right? If I don't have that, I don't know what I'm going to do. Everything else is worthless. It feels like that to her because it's an idol and it can't carry the weight. And so Jacob gets all theological now, which is the first time ever. And he's angry. And he said, am I in the place of God? Now he's A.W. Tozer here all of a sudden, right? He's married 2 women. And now he's this great theologian with no compassion for his wife. Does she need compassion? Yes. Does she need a little truth? Yes. But he said, am I in the place of God? This is God. This is a God thing. This is what he's doing. And so verse 3, she does what all of us do when we don't get our way. She figures it out on her own. She's going to come up with her own little scheme. She said, here's my servant Bilhah. Go into her so she may give birth on my behalf, that even I may have children through her. Well, we've seen this before, have we not? Abraham, right? Hagar, and it didn't end well there. But see, this is the height of when we want something so bad, we'll do anything. I know it didn't work for them, but for me, it's going to work because I can be better than that. Right? It won't affect me. It affects everybody else, but not me. I can handle it. And so she figures out a way to circumvent what God is doing so she can be happy and does something that's culturally acceptable but not wise, right? And so what she does is she gives her servant to her husband being a moron, says, okay. And so he gave him his servant Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her, and she conceived and bore Jacob a son, right? And here's what she says, verse 7. Jacob's servant Bilhah, I skipped one. There you go. Rachel said, God had judged me and has heard my voice and given me a son. Therefore, his name shall be called Dan. She says, look, it worked. So I'm going to call him vindicated or justified. Dan. That's what his name means. Look at my plan was great. Look what I came up with. And it worked. Right? And yeah, it did. And you can, just so you know, you can figure it out sometimes and try to circumvent God's will, and you can see some short-term success, but what's the long-term consequence? That's what you got to ask, right? And maybe you could argue, well, look, God used it, right? 12 tribes. Yeah, that's what God does, because he's God. But that doesn't make it good, right? And we're not to tempt God in that way. And so she says, I'm going to catch my sister. I'm losing 4-1 right now, but we'll see where we're going to end up. So she does it again. Rachel's servant Bilhah again conceived and bore Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. So she called him Naphtali, which means wrestlings. And look at, again, the language. I'm going to war with my sister and I'm winning. Now I have love and 2 boys. Really, they're not mine, but they're kind of mine because I'm adopting them. I am winning. And again, she thinks she's wrestling with her sister. She's really wrestling with herself and with God, right? She's fighting against him, not against her sister. And so here's where we're at so far, right? This is kind of we got 6 kids. Remember, we're building to the 12 tribes. This is where we're at, but we're going to continue, all right? Just to give you a visual of what we got. Bilhah, Leah, there's Jacob, Abraham, Sarah, there's the family tree. Let's go to the next one. Here's skirmish number 3. Next one. There we go. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. She's like, man, she's catching up. It's 4-2. I got to get back in the game. And so she slips back in to the very thing that she was struggling with before. And she says, here's my servant. And Jacob's like, okay. And so Leah bore Zilpah. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, good fortune has come. So she called him good fortune or Gad or lucky. Right? Look how good it is. Now I'm winning again. And then she does it again. She bore a second son, and Leah said, happy am I. She got lucky and happy out of this deal. So she calls him Asher, which means happy. But notice the phrase, for women have called me happy. She says, I'm happy. Why? Everyone says I should be happy because look at all that I have. Is she really happy? She doesn't seem to be because she's still striving to earn this guy's love, and it doesn't seem to be working, right? So we got happy and we got lucky, but she's still striving. And then we go into skirmish number 4, which things continue to get out of control. This is where it gets real ugly. In the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben went, remember he's the oldest, and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And we don't know exactly what this is culturally, but for some reason, they believe mandrakes to be an aphrodisiac or a fertility drug, right? And so he goes out, finds these, brings them to his mother Leah, which tells me that she's still striving. Because her oldest son, however old he knows that she's not satisfied. Here, Mom, this will help. And then Rachel sees that and she says, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, it is a small matter that you have taken away my husband. You take away my mandrakes also. This is the nature of their relationship. You already stole my husband. Now you want to assault my kid and take his mandrakes? That's the chaos in this house, right? And it shows that the wounds that Leah has are ongoing. This is not something in the past. This is something right now, right? She thinks, if I can just get kids, things will be better. If I can just get love. There's a bitterness that is rooted there. And so Rachel says, that he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes. She says, I'll give you my husband tonight. Date night for you if you give the mandrakes. That's how backwards this family is right now. And Leah says, okay, that's a great deal. And Jacob came in from the field, and Leah went out to meet him and said, date night for us. You must come unto me, for I have hired you. Listen to the language. I've hired you with my mandrakes. So he lay with her that night, right? And here's the irony. Rachel thought, I'm going to get the mandrakes. This is going to be good for me. What ends up happening is Leah ends up getting pregnant. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. And she said, God has given me my wages. I gave my servant to my husband. So she called him Issachar, which means reward or wages. Right? So Rachel thinks she's going to get the advantage. Leah has another kid. And then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun, which means honor. Listen to the language again. I have 6 sons. He has to honor me now. I mean, really, I have 6 plus 2. He's got to honor me. She's still craving what she does not have. She even has a daughter. Afterwards, she bore a daughter called her name Dinah, which means justified or vindicated. And she's still not fulfilled. She's still not fulfilled, right? It's just crazy. All right, here's where we're at. All right, Zilpah, Bilhah, Leah. All right, it's getting bigger. Christmas is getting more chaotic, okay? College funds are getting smaller, right? This is where we're at right now, but we're not done. We got another skirmish coming, all right? Here's the next one, skirmish number 4. God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, may the Lord add to me another son. So finally, Rachel has her own son. And look at the language here. This is very telling. She says, God has taken away my reproach, the reproach of not having children. This tells you that she knows that having kids through her servant, number 1, are not fulfilling, and number 2, that it didn't work, right? That ultimately, everything she was striving for, it was wrong. She actually did it the wrong way. But now, God has taken away my reproach. And she calls his name Joseph, but she's still not satisfied. And it's telling in his name, because you know what Joseph means? It means, give me another boy. It means I want another son. May the Lord add another. So she gets the son she wants, and he becomes the hero of the rest of the book, the Christ-like character, right? And it's not enough. She wants more because it's never enough. And she does, by the way, get another son. His name is going to be Benjamin, and he is going to kill her at birth. So she's going to get what she wants, and then she's going to die. Right, but that's coming in a couple weeks, right? So here's where we're at. Here's the final count, and there's actually more daughters, but Dinah is the only one mentioned because we're going to see something tragic happen to her in a few weeks. But here's where we're at. Rachel's got Joseph. Benjamin's on the way, right? Not yet, but he's coming. Leah's got her own crowd there. She's got 6 boys, and Bilhah and Zilpah have 4. These are the tribes of Israel. These are the ones, and you look at the map, and you see the map of all the tribes. This is where Gad was. This is where Dan was. This is where Judah was. This is where Benjamin. That's what's going on here. So all of a sudden, God's promise of many nations and a fruitful people, it's getting some traction. We didn't get much traction for 150 years. Now we got some traction. Now we're moving. We got our starting lineup for football with Benjamin on the way. And that's the battle of Maids and Mandrakes. And if it's making you feel a little bit better about the dysfunction in your family, good. But that's not the point. That's not the root issue. Can you identify, I hope by now, the root issue of this family? I mean, if you have old Leah and Rachel, and you got them in the counseling room, and you're like, okay, you ladies you're going to hug and kiss at the end of this. You're going to make up. What are you going to tell them? What's the problem? You could say, well, your husband's a knucklehead, and that is true. Yes, he is a passive man. Right? He doesn't lead, he doesn't pray, he doesn't do anything in this passage. But he's, as bad as that is, he's not the problem. Right? What is the problem? I think the half-brother of Jesus, James, identifies the problem very simply in 2 simple verses. Look at what James says. What causes quarrels? What causes fights? Good question. Rachel, Leah, what causes these? Is it not this? That your passions are at war within you. You desire and you do not have. Did they do that? Mm-hmm. And so you murder, not physically, but they hated each other, right? Which Jesus says in Matthew 5 is the equivalent of murder. You covet and cannot obtain. Did they do that? Mm-hmm. So you fight and you quarrel. Do not have because you don't ask. Is that not the problem? Is that not the issue? Both have passions, want something they cannot have, both craving what the other has, and both thinking, once I get that, I will be happy. Things will be better. And even when they do get some of it, they're not. And in the end, they both get a little bit of what they want, and then they don't get what they really want. And it keeps spiraling out of control until the kids get involved, until there's just this vicious cycle of skirmishing back and forth. It's a cycle. 5 skirmishes. And I read an article this week about, it was an interview with Ben Affleck. And a very interesting article. He's had some struggles in the last couple years, specifically that he was the worst Batman since George Clooney, but that's another issue. Deeper issues. But here's what he says, and I thought this was fascinating for someone that most of us would say, this guy's got it all. Money, fame, he played superheroes, blah, 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 whatever. He's got an Oscar. This guy's got it all. But this is what he says, and let me read this quote to you. He says, you're trying to make yourself feel better with eating and drinking and sex and gambling and shopping or whatever. But that ends up making your life worse. That's an interesting statement. And then he says you do more of it to make that discomfort go away. And notice what he says next. That's when the real pain starts. It becomes a vicious cycle you cannot break. That's at least what happened to me, is what he says. That's Rachel and Leah. They're striving for, if I just get one more kid, if I just have his love, if I just have this, and it becomes a vicious cycle, and you want more and more and more, and in the end, you end up spiraling out. And what these 2 ladies have done is what the prophet Jeremiah, what God sends him to the people of Israel, this is what the people of Israel are going to constantly do. Here's what Jeremiah says. Has a nation changed its gods, even though they are not gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked, be utterly desolate, declares the Lord. For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters. He's the source of life. He's the source of refreshment. He's the source of joy. And they've forsaken, and notice the second one, and they have hewed out cisterns from themselves, broken that can hold no water. They've rejected true life and true satisfaction and true joy, and they have tried to make it with these broken wells, and all they're doing is just leaking water, and it's empty. Right? Y'all, if that is not a word for our culture, I don't know what is. Because we are one of the richest people to ever walk the face of the earth. We have more resources, we have more influence, we have more power, we have more control, and we think that we can just take matters into our hands and just get what we want, and then when we get what we want, we will be fulfilled, and it'll make us happy. And I don't think it's working. I just don't think it's working. Right? Have you ever done this? Have you ever, just that's what you have to have, and that will make me, if I just get to this, if I just get to that, then I'll be happy, then I'll have arrived. Let me give you a few questions to ask to kind of diagnose your own heart. Maybe you can see where you've done this or when, because we all have. What is that thing, that dream that you have that you will sacrifice anything to get, even if it means compromising your integrity, your faith, your family, but you have to have that. Is it achievement? Is it grades? Is it a relationship? Is it success? To be accepted with that group? What is that void that is deep in you that you have to fill? And that you might even be putting pressure on others to help you fill. Or maybe you're trying to build an identity around something like a perception or what people think of you or how you feel about something. Or maybe it's some past tragedy or wound that you have that someone said something or did something that you can still remember. It happened 10 years ago, but it's like yesterday. And you've kind of blamed them for everything, and you're using that as your to make people feel for you. And you're battling others, you're battling God. Or what is that thing that you cannot live without? If I don't get that, life is not worth living. If I don't get into Georgia, right? I can tell you a lot of people get into Georgia that are still miserable, just so you know. I hope you get in. But what is that thing? I got to be making this much money. I have to have children. I have to be married or else life is not worth living. I have to get that job. I have to be able to have that kind of lifestyle. I have to look that pretty, that thin, right? What is it if it's taken away, it's not, you think life is not worth living, right? It's the same thing here, right? What does your soul crave? And I can tell you, if it's anything like them, it just doesn't end well. And there's only one solution. I want to give you a word, just a word to think through as we move into worship in a few minutes. And it's a challenging word, but it's a word that if these ladies would have grasped it, things would have went so better. It's contentment. Contentment. I think Leah got a little taste of it after Judah was born, but she got brought back into this thing by her sister and this competition. Contentment. Are you content? And when I say contentment, don't hear me saying lazy, don't strive for excellence, don't try to have any goals. I'm not talking about that. Okay, we're not talking about just like not just sitting back and doing nothing. I'm just content to, No, you should be excellent and you should strive for excellence in all things. And you should try to do well in everything. But after you've given it your best effort, are you content with where God has put you? That's the question. Do you have peace? Like she did. I rest. I have Judah. I'm going to praise the Lord. I'm just going to rest. Because I think as a people, we're so concerned with where we are at or where we're not at. And see, God is not concerned with the wheres, but he is concerned with the who you are. Because he'll take care of the where when you think and focus on the who. We focus on what we want, our abilities, or this or that, and so we strive for that, and then we ask God on the back end, could you bless this, God? Because this is what I want, this is where I want to go. Instead of seeking first the kingdom and then letting him use your abilities and direct your paths. We think about what we don't have and what we want to be and how we want to be different and how we want to be this and that, and we forget who is the one who made you. Who is the one who put you where you are? Who is the one who has allowed this situation? You were fearfully and wonderfully made. My wife will often say, God don't make no junk. Right? And you're like, well, I wish I was this. Look, I've been wishing I was taller since 1973. And that's before I was born. It ain't going to happen. All right? I think for us, how you say, how do I have contentment? I think a couple things. Number one, instead of always thinking about what you don't have, could you look at what you do? I mean, this morning when I was driving here and Gardner said, man, the sanctuary stinks. I'm like, well, you should have showered, buddy, but no. My first thought was, figures. Can't even, something always goes wrong on a Sunday morning. But then I was thinking, we have an unbelievable facility to worship in that is paid for, that God has gifted us, that you have a pretty comfortable seat, you have excellent coffee, you have moderately decent company next to you. Why? Do you realize that some of our partners in Africa have not been able to worship in a church building because the government have shut them down? And they ride miles and miles to church on bikes and walk. And you sat in your heated car with heated seats. And yeah, I know it stinks a little bit. So what? But we always are thinking about what we do not have. What if Leah would have said, man, it's hard that my husband doesn't love me. That is a hard situation. I'm not saying that's easy. That's horrible for her. But what if she would have been like, yes, but I have these boys and these girls, and I'm going to teach them to not be partial in their relationships. And I am thankful, God, that you have blessed me with kids. Do I want my husband's love? I do. But I know I have your love. I can rest in that. She would have ended the skirmishes, the wrestlings. And what if Rachel would have just said, I want kids so badly, and that is hard, and some of you have been facing that wound, and that is a trying place. But what if she would have said, but my husband adores me? And my daddy loves me. And my Father in heaven, he loves me. And I can rest in that. That's enough. There's no battle of maids and mandrakes because there's a contentment and a rest. And God would have brought the kids. He had to. He promised he would. Right? See, I think we're so focused on what we don't have and what we're not, instead of looking at what we do have. And in the end, contentment doesn't come from even stuff or food. Although Paul does say, if we have food and clothes, well, this is enough. Most of y'all have that. Right? So that's enough. We're content. He says, godliness with contentment is great gain. See, the world needs to see a people that are not always grumbling and complaining about how bad things are. I can't believe this and I can't believe that. And then someone let their dog out and they went in my yard and someone this and someone that. Because when they see a Christian that is grumbling and complaining, what comes to their mind is, well, they're no different than me. Their God is no bigger than me because they're just as happy as I am. But when they see someone who is content and living with passion and with excellence, but is content where they're at, that is distinct. And it's great gain. You say, how can I have that? Paul gives us a solution in a very famous passage, and you know it, and you've misquoted it to every basketball player who ever's gone to the free throw line. But he says this. He's in jail at this point, by the way. He's in prison, and not in a nice, luxurious prison. He's in a prison where he basically is alone, and he is isolated, and he is cold. And he says, not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. In any circumstance, I have learned the secret. There's a secret to it. Everyone loves a secret. This word is actually used outside the Bible of the secret knowledge of a cult. Right? So it's a special insider information. I know the insider information of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. What is it? That I can do all things through Christ. He strengthens me. It's the secret to contentment is Christ. It's that relationship with him. It's his affirmation. I don't need to strive to perform. Why? Because I have a God who performed for me. I don't need to strive for affirmation and love because I have a God who already loved me. I don't have to worry about stuff because he says if I seek first the kingdom, he's going to clothe me like he does the birds. He's going to feed me like he does the birds. He's going to take care of all my needs based on his faithfulness. So I can be content. That's the secret. Right? That's the secret, that Christ is enough. I don't have 3 points for you this morning. I just have that message. This is the message for the church. Jesus is enough, y'all. He just is. He's enough for your job. He's enough for your marriage. He's enough for your relationships. He's enough for your finances. He's enough for your struggles. He is enough. Some of you need to hear that this morning and be encouraged in that. Because you are lonely or you're struggling and you are longing for something and you may get what you're longing for, but then you realize it's not what you wanted, that Christ is enough. I heard a story. I was listening to a sermon in preparation for this, and I heard the preacher use this story, and I was like, man, that's a great story. So I Googled it, and I found it after about an hour. I want to read it because I feel like it's the heart of this idea. So I'm just going to read it, and then we'll close and we'll worship. But listen to this story. It's not a Christian story, but I think it's a Christian message. And the story is told by the Persians of the great Shah Abbas, who reigned magnificently in Persia. But he loved to mingle with the people in disguise. And once dressed as a poor man, he descended the long flight of stairs, dark and damp, to the tiny cellar where the fireman, seated on ashes, was tending the furnace. The king sat down beside him and began to talk. And at mealtime, the fireman produced some coarse black bread and a jug of water, and they ate and they drank. And the Shah went away, but he returned again and again, for his heart was filled with sympathy for this lonely man. And he gave him sweet counsel, and the poor man opened his whole heart and loved this friend, so kind and wise, yet poor like himself. And at last the emperor thought, I will tell him who I am and see what gift he will ask. So he said, you think me poor, but I am Shah Abbas, your emperor. And he expected a petition for some great thing, but the man sat silent, gazing on him with love and wonder. Then the king said, haven't you understood? I can make you rich and noble. I can give you a city. I can appoint you as a great ruler. Have you nothing to ask? And the man replied gently, yes, my lord, I understood. But what is this you have done? To leave your palace and glory, to sit with me in this dark place, to partake of my coarse fare, to care whether my heart is glad or sorry. Even you can give nothing more precious. On others you may bestow rich presents, but to me you have given yourself. It only remains to ask you that you never withdraw this gift of your friendship. That's what our God has done. He has left his palace in his glory. He has eaten our coarse bread. He has been tempted in all ways, yet without sin. He has tasted death, went into the tomb, and came out victorious. He has promised never to leave or forsake. And there is nothing more precious, not the blessings of the king, but the presence and the person of the king. That the king of the universe would be so gracious to us, that he would choose a Jacob, that he would choose a you to be his child, and that he longs for intimacy, that he stands at the door and knocks, and if you open the door, he will come in and dine with you and be with you. This is his promise. That is the precious king that we worship and serve. And so let's put away the mandrakes and the maids and find contentment in he who can actually bring it to our souls. And if you're striving for something else, man, today's the day to say, I'm going to stop. I'm going to Judah. I'm going to praise. Right? And so we're going to have that opportunity. We're going to Judah together. Right? We're going to sing and worship and respond. And if you've been striving for this or striving for that, this is a time to refocus your affections on the one who can carry the weight of glory and meet your need. So why don't you stand and we will worship together.